Breathing in, breathing out. Place the right hand on the heart, left hand over the right. And come back into the vow that we were talking about in class earlier. And for those who are joining just for this class, making a vow of peace. To practice peace. To explore peace, what it could mean for you. To embody peace. To empower peace. Om Shanti Swarupaham. I am the form of peace. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras, taking a breath in. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrin Vanuti Visidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano Divo Brahataf Parvata Da Saraswati Ajata Gantu Yagnyam Havan Devi Sutusana Mritachi Shagmam Nova Chamushati Shrinotu Vagdevyai Namaha. And gently releasing the hands down, fluttering the eyes open. Oh, I got a little tongue twisted there for a moment. So, what shall we talk about today? Peace. Seems like the thing to go with, since that was what we started with in class this morning. Peace and the concept of peace. And so if you look up peace in a dictionary or an encyclopedia, I'm sure you'll find a lot of different definitions for peace. But the most common one would probably be the absence of conflict. The absence of conflict equals peace. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that that is a fully encompassing definition of the potential of peace. Because peace is not necessarily the absence of conflict. Peace is the ability to be serene, clear. The tongue is not working today. Clear, stable, easeful, specific, straightforward, calm, in the face of conflict. And if we were going to apply the idea that peace is the absence of conflict in any way, shape, or form, it would be inside, not outside. But even inside, is the absence of conflict possible? And the answer is no, it's really not. Because we have an overly active mind, we have a typically unhealthy ego, we have a body that is constantly battling itself, constantly conflicting itself. So conflict is always present. But peace is the ability to stand in the center of that conflict and not let go of your ethics, your ideals, your contentment, your ability to be clear, straightforward, to seek out the greater good, your ability to not give in to the conflict. That's what peace is. On the one level, because there's levels to everything. So on the first level, it's a pretty primal level, actually, you know. It's kind of saying that there's going to be wars in the world. There's going to be violence in the human-made world. There's going to be what is perceived of as violence in nature. You know, earthquakes, tsunamis, forest fires. things that we cannot control, that we look at and we say, oh, that's very violent. So violence is conflict. So we see that there's conflict in the man-made world. We see that there's conflict in the natural-made world. There's always conflict out there, and there's not much at all that we can do to change that. Through our activism, we can certainly come into a place where we support and empower a greater sense of peacefulness, but it's not going to undo all of the violence that exists in the world. What activism for peace does is it provides a few things. It provides a sanctuary where people feel safe, or at least safer in comparison to the throes of the outside world. It provides an opportunity for education. What kind of education? Well, the education that teaches you resiliency, that teaches you that you don't actually have to give up your sense of internal contentment for conflict. You don't have to throw contentment out the window just because there's a conflicting situation happening that you're witnessing. You don't have to throw out your clarity because someone is yelling in your face. So the education is learning that. And that's a really big lesson to learn because most of us don't believe it. Most of us just don't believe it. We're like, well, no, how do you walk through this world and not just be defensive? I like the giggles. How do you walk through this world and not just be defensive, not have your guard up all the time? And there is a saying that whatever you have in your mind is in some way, shape, or form what is drawn to you. Now, I both agree and disagree. Because I think that we look at that and then we become blamers. And we're like, well, if you would only think positively, then you would never have another conflict in your whole entire life, and that's BS, right? Because we just established that there's always going to be conflict. But there is some truth to the idea that what you look for is what you will find. So if you're walking through life with this idea that, I got to keep all of these guards and defenses up because otherwise, I'm going to be hurt, or someone's going to take advantage of me, then basically what you're doing is you're creating your own suffering. You're creating your own place of conflict because your heart is not what is telling you that. The head and the ego are what are telling you that. And the heart is saying you're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking toward your fears and asking your sometimes very highly illogical fears, but also sometimes very baseless. You're asking them, and fears based in the past, which have validity to them, but no longer in the current standing of your life necessarily, at least for the most part. You're looking to those impressions, those emotions, and you're asking them to give you an answer. And the only answer they're going to give you is one that digs a deeper hole of conflict. And the heart is sitting there saying, faith is your answer. Patience is your answer. Compassion is your answer. Unity is your answer. Love is your answer. The difference between the two is that the fears and all of those other things, they're screaming. And the heart whispers. The heart says, I'm not going to try to outscream them. That's just ridiculous. They're only screaming because they don't really know what they're saying. They're just grasping. And you know that in the yoga teachings, it says, don't grasp. Because the moment that you start grasping, that's the moment that your suffering deepens. And it will continue to deepen for as long as you continue to grasp. So the heart says, I'm not going to fight with that. I'm not going to go there. I will just sit here and whisper quietly until you hear me. And inevitably, you will hear the heart. But then there's a lot of complicated things that have to happen. So when you have a moment where you say to yourself something like, well, there has to be a different way to do this. You heard your heart. But then the ego jumps forward and says, nope, because if you put your defenses down, then you know what's going to happen. The same thing that always happens, because it always happens. But anybody who is of a clear mind knows that there is no such thing as always or never. There's only diversity. So nothing has always ever happened, and nothing will never happen. Now, I don't know, maybe nothing shouldn't be there, but you know what I'm saying, right? I think it was, what is his name? He's the scientist guy. His last name begins with a D.
Neil deGrasse.
Thank you so much. Neil deGrasse had a great conversation on what is nothing? Is nothing even a possibility? Could there be a concept of nothing in this universe, which is full of somethings? So I digress. But it is a great conversation. So always or never, we have to move away from those because they're the antithesis to peace. If we think that there's always going to be a lack of conflict, if we are at peace, then we will never be at peace. If we think that there will never be a conflict, then we will never be at peace. We will not find peace because we're putting ourselves into that rabbit hole, into that misunderstanding. So instead, we have to do as the Buddha suggested and come into this middle ground place. And what I mean by the middle ground, according to the Buddha, is this idea that we have the ability to balance our perception, to balance our expectations, to balance our responses, to balance our reactions. We have the ability to balance. We have the ability to look out into the world and to say, what it is that I'm witnessing is violence. And we have the ability to accept that we're going to have a reaction to that. Whatever it has to do with, we will have a reaction to it. And that reaction will bring up emotions in us that are based in past experiences or anticipation of future experiences. And if we acknowledge that, if we say, I know that is what's happening, but there's really no reality there because the past is no longer happening and the future isn't even here yet. And how many of you are fortune tellers? So why do we play that game? What is happening right here, right now? That is what needs my attention. That is what needs my concern, my clarity. That is what needs my vow. What is happening right here and right now? And when we place ourselves into the here and the now, we will ultimately find peace because that is the only place where we will see conflict for what it is, a distraction and an opportunity. Both. It's a distraction if the ego is leading the way. Because it's an opportunity to over-dramatize. It's an opportunity to become lost in the throes of emotions. It's an opportunity to complain. It's an opportunity to become stuck. So that's the way that it's a distraction. But it's also a positive opportunity. Because when we're thinking clearly, when we're present to the now, and we see conflict, we are more likely to recognize what's needed. And then we can fill that need. We see a hungry child and we feed them. We see an animal stuck in the middle of a roadway. We get out and we move it. We support it somehow. We see that there are people suffering from loneliness. We address the loneliness. We become more inclusive because we don't wish to see in clarity. We don't wish to see other people suffering because we know what that is. And so in that place of being in this present moment, we're able to more aptly apply our skills, whatever they might be, to what is needed versus what is even further distracting. Does that make sense? And then this beautiful thing happens. The moment that you start living that way, the moment that you start living from a place of greater peace, which is an acceptance, it's not a denial. Peace is an acceptance. The moment you start living from that place of presence and acceptance, the moment you yourself become more peaceful. Many of us have run around at some point in our life like little chickens with no heads, right? Because we've been in a situation or seen a situation that we want to change and we know it's not going to. But we run around and we say, why won't it change? 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 We ask every single person we've ever met, why won't it change? Why won't it change? Why won't it change? It becomes a very deep groove in a record. Why won't it change? Why won't it change? And then all of that energy that we spent creating that groove in that record, why won't it change? Why won't it change? Is energy that could have been invested someplace else. Like, if that won't change, then what's over here? What am I not looking at because I'm so heavily invested in that? Where is the opportunity for personal growth? Where is the opportunity for inclusion? Where is the opportunity for peace? We're not likely to ask those types of questions when we're busy in the groove of, why won't it change? Why won't it change? Why won't it change? Why me? Or any of those other statements that we make. And I don't say this in a way that means to belittle or demean or underestimate the impact of trauma on people's life and the way that that holds us to our past, because I'm keenly aware of that myself. Keenly aware of that myself in my own life. But what I do know is that my life was a very highly conflicted and distracted place when I existed in my past more than I do in my present. And when I took those past experiences and projected them into my future, even if it was a minute from now. As I was busy projecting and reflecting, there was no time to be here. And so a lot of things escaped me as a result of that. I recognize the impact that that trauma has on anybody who has experienced trauma. And perhaps for individuals who live in a state of being overly traumatized, it's even more important. Even more. My husband used to call it loopy. He would say I would get loopy. And so what he meant by that is that I would have a thought and it would loop and loop and loop. And one of the things early on, 30 years ago, in counseling, I went to counseling for many, many years in order to be able to get clear, and to be able to differentiate. That was the past. The future isn't here yet. This is the present. And all that entails. One of the things that I learned very much about was this concept of looping. And so talking to the counselor about it, and she said, oh yeah, there's absolutely this concept of looping where, an individual who's been traumatized, they grab a hold of a thought and they keep replaying it and replaying it and replaying it. And I didn't make the connection at that point in time. It wasn't for a couple of more years where, I don't know, some teacher somewhere, I don't think it was Swamiji, but they talked again about the deep groove in the record concept that we talk about in yoga. And I was like, oh, that's looping. That's looping. When will it change? When will it change? When will it change? It's looping. And so yogis talked about this mental tendency 5,000 years ago. It's very human. It's very human. But they also gave us the answer to it 5,000 years ago. They said instead of allowing your mind to loop like that and dig deeper and deeper grooves into the record that you would then get stuck in, and an individual who has a lot of trauma is going to get stuck. It's just the way that it is. So instead of playing that, purposefully create another groove. Purposely. Start saying something else. The moment that your mind goes to that place, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not this, I'm not that, the world is bad, whatever your loop happens to be, the moment you start repeating that to yourself, change it. Change it. Say something else. Say something else. Swami Shraddhananda was known for saying, non-grasping is a very big concept in yoga, but as humans, we're going to grasp. So, if you're going to grasp at something, let it be your peace. Grasp at your peace. So the moment that those loops come forward, change the story. I am the form of peace. I am the form of peace. I am the form of peace. I am peace. I am peace. It doesn't have to be complicated. Very simple. Peace. One word. Peace. 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 And then what ends up happening is that at some point, that statement becomes as, if not more powerful than the other one. It begins to rewrite your understanding of yourself. And it's necessary work for the peace activist to do this. Absolutely 100%. Because it's too easy to doubt. It's too easy to throw our arms up in the air and say, this is taking too long. I've been meditating for 3 months. How much longer is this going to take? Any of you ever say that to yourself? I've been practicing yoga for 5 years. How much longer? I had a lovely student. She's so wonderful. She came up to me one day and she said, Swamini, I've been practicing yoga for 40 years. How much longer? And lifetimes. Lifetimes. There was a priest or a monk, and he was walking down the street. There was a beggar sitting on the sidewalk, and the beggar said to him, can I speak with you? Can I ask you a question? And then the monk said, what can I do for you? And he said, well, I heard that you're on your way to see Shiva. Could you ask Shiva a question for me? And he said, sure. Now, he said sure because he was being polite. He didn't want to hurt the man, but he figured, looking at the man, it's this person who has not got a sharp intellect, who is not involved in the temple, who doesn't probably even know the prayers. Shiva's probably not even going to answer his question, but he'll take his question anyway. So he said, sure, tell me, what would you like me to ask him? And he goes, well, would you ask him how much longer? Would you ask him if it's possible? If peace for me is possible? And he says, I'll ask him. I'll stop by on my way back. He goes down the road a little bit more, and he runs into the people from the temple, and they come running up to him, and they're like, oh, I hear you're going to see Shiva. Would you ask him a question for us? Would you tell him? We've been very, very good devotees. We've done all of our daily mantras. We take care of the temple. We do our pujas. Would you ask him, how much longer? How much longer until peace? Until there's peace? And then he says, yes, of course, I'll ask him. And then he goes down the road a little more, and there's like the governor or something, and the governor comes up to him and goes, I hear you're going to see Shiva. Would you ask him a question for me? Tell him I take good care of his state. I take good care of the citizens, his devotees. Ask him, how much longer? How much longer? I make good donations to the temple. Ask him how much longer. He goes, sure, I'll ask him. He goes to Shiva, and on his way back, he stops by the governor. And the governor said, what did he say? And he says, well, he said for you it's probably going to be about 72 more lives. He goes, what? Does he know how much money I give? Does he know how much good I do in the community by taking care of all of his devotees? Does he even know that? He said, I don't know. You have talked to him. He said 72 more lives. That was it. He gets all mad. He's walking alongside the monk complaining about this, this prescription. The monk comes in contact with the temple goers. And the temple goers come running out. What did he say? What did he say? And he says, well, he said for each of you, somewhere in the range of like 100 to 150 more lives. And the temple goers were like, what? I've spent my whole life dedicated to Shiva. What do you mean I have to do 150 more lives? That is not fair. Who does he think he is? Doesn't he see how hard I work? What's up with him? He obviously didn't hear you correctly. Because, did you tell him it was me? It's like, I told him. That's what he said. So now they're all following the monk, and they're all complaining and bantering to one another, and the monk comes across the beggar. And the beggar says, excuse me, good sir. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I understand that you're traveling back from your time with Shiva. Did you ask him? for me? And he said, yes, I did. What did he say? Is it possible? Shiva showed up and enlightened him instantaneously. I get goosebumps. Enlightened him instantaneously, and the man fell into a deep, deep peace. All the other people walked up to Shiva with looks on their faces. How can you betray us like this? Shiva said, whoa, do you know who you're talking to? I am the Lord of Destruction. He said, listen, what's important for you to understand is you all wanted to know, how much longer do I have to do this? How much longer? How much longer? And you got mad at the answer, which created more conflict within yourself and between each other and between you and me. This man is joyful that it's even possible. Whether it was 1,000 more lives or 10,000 more lives or 100,000 more lives, he became a joy to himself just to know that it was possible. Therein lies the benefit of creating a new loop for yourself. I am peace, I am peace, I am peace. And even if in a moment, or lots of moments, that statement is not yet strong enough to overcome the tendencies to go back to the previous loops, don't lose faith. Stay with it. Repeat your mantra. Repeat your affirmation. Do your daily practices. Because eventually, you will know peace. And in more than just a second or two, or a moment or two, a minute or two, an hour or two, more consistently you'll know it. Because that's the gift that it brings to you. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna was so conflicted within himself. Not Krishna, Arjuna. Arjuna was so conflicted within himself. Do I go to war? Do I not go to war? Do I battle against my cousins? Do I not battle against my cousins? Do I lay down and let them kill me? Do I not lay down and let them kill me? What do I do? This is crazy. I can't stand this. I hate this. I don't want to do this. Krishna listened patiently. And of course, I'm paraphrasing greatly. Mm-hmm. But that's basically the argument. That's basically the internal conflict that Arjuna had was, I don't want to do this. I was fine doing it every other time. Now I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it because I know these people. I don't want to do it because it's inconvenient. I don't want to do it because I've been doing it for a long time and now I'm bored. And, whatever the reason is, that's the conflict that's within us, is I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to sit down. Getting a piece of pizza's got to be better than doing my japa. Taking a car ride's got to be better than meditating. Calling up someone and complaining about the conditions of the world today has to be better than getting on the mat and doing your asanas. There's always some distraction that we look to, and we think that that's going to bring me a greater happiness. That's going to bring me a contentment. That's going to bring me peace. But it doesn't, and it won't. You might enjoy that piece of pizza. And Michelle and I had a conversation the other day because I told her, I'm gluten-free because I have gluten intolerance. But the other day I did go have a piece of pizza. First time in a really long time. And it was so, so good. So I just had to confess that. But again, I digress. But those things, they're temporary. So very temporary. Like that piece of pizza is no longer with me. It wasn't with me anymore after like a few moments. The taste of it, love. The taste of it. It's no longer with me, right? So I can sit here for days, weeks, months, years, and fawn over the memory of that pizza, or I can move on. I can move into something that's now. What are you fawning over in your life? What are you looking back to? And fawning over either in an idealistic way or in a denial way, or in a why way. in a never again way, whatever words you put to it. What are you fawning over from the past? Projecting into the future that's keeping you from now. And basically, that's what Krishna said to Arjuna. He said, you are worried about things that don't matter. Very clear. He said that. You are worried about things that do not matter. The past is no longer happening. Yes, there's psychological work that we all have to do, absolutely. But it is helpful and beneficial to us to know that the past is no longer happening. It is not a reality anymore. It's not a reality anymore. The past is not a reality anymore. The past has very little truth to it. Because I don't know about you, but when I look back at my past, when I was a little girl, I've always loved insects. And so I would go back into the backyard when we lived in Manasquan, New Jersey, and my grandmother had this big snowball bush, hydrangeas. Yeah, the beautiful blue ones. And I'd go there because the spiders would hang out there. And I would take her lime green margarine container outside with me, and I would catch myself a spider. And then I had a friend. And I would play with the spider, and I'd feed the spider and stuff like that, And my brother and I are sitting there, because I got this really weird spider one time. Is probably just an orb spider. But to me, at that point in time, it looked big. Like the size of my hand. It was huge. It almost didn't fit under the margarine container. And so my brother and I are sitting there, and I had a huge imagination as a child. I was probably like 6 at the time or something. And he's totally playing into it as my older brother, And my grandmother comes out. And to me, this spider was like huge. It was very special, but it was also kind of scary. And I just loved this creature, this being. Nana came out and said, you took my margarine container again. What is underneath of that? What are you playing with? She picks it up. She goes, oh my God, smash. Hey, I know it has left an impression in a lot of different ways. Number one, the spider probably wasn't that big. Have you all seen an orb spider? They're like this big. Not the size of my hand. Not big, so big that it wouldn't fit under a margarine container, The spider didn't have magical powers, It didn't talk to me, right? It wasn't my friend in that kind of a way. It was just probably some little insect that I horrified when I captured it, try and just get home to its family or something, And yes, the impression of my grandmother, squashing it was pretty heavy for a while. Yeah. But why did she do that? She did that out of fear, out of her own fear, out of her own concern, out of her thought that I was going to get bit, And that at that point in time, it, probably just wasn't appropriate for a female child to play with spiders, whatever. And snakes. I used to bring those home too. Oh. Yeah. Totally. So now I've digressed and I've kind of lost my way. So I'm going to try to circle back around again to Krishna and Arjuna, and to say, that when we're focused so heavily on the past, our mind is full of misunderstanding, of elaborations and exaggerations, of things that aren't really true, and they might have some truth to them, but the ego, it amplifies everything and makes it look bigger or smaller than it really was. Makes it different somehow. So it almost steals from us the lessons that we could have learned when we do look back. Because looking back is also important. We learn valuable lessons from the past, but we're not meant to dwell there. We're not meant to live there. We're just meant to understand and move forward. So Krishna said to Arjuna, your fear that the world is never going to be the same, that the cities are all going to be corrupt, that women will all be tainted. These are all fears that you've carried forward with you that don't reflect what the current situation actually is. Because all those things, they're already happening. There is a war because there's corruption. And there are people in the world who are tainted. And so why are you worried about these things? There is some semblance there that these things are already happening. So that's not where your fears need to lie, that they're going to happen as a result of your action. Instead, just take the right action. Put yourself into the situation where you are taking right action. You are doing what is needed, not based on your fears of the past, not based on your projections to the future, but based on where you find yourself right now. Where are you right now? And the only way, and Krishna said to Arjuna, the only way that you know the right now is through devotion. It's through devotion. What does he mean by devotion?
I didn't turn the heat on.
Oh, if anybody would like a blanket, Michelle just brought some here. Well, I mean, we can put the heat on. Let's do that. There we go. So hopefully that'll bring a little warmth in a few minutes.
Everyone jumping jacks.
So Krishna's words to Arjuna were, devotion is really important. It's very, very important. But what does that mean for people? Is it that you're being told that you have to be devoted to Krishna, you have to pray to Krishna? And no, that's not what's being said. Of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, that's what's being said. But in the overall picture of the world that we live in and the world that we've created, it's you need to be devoted to something. You need to be devoted to something. So if you're comfortable being devoted to God, then pick a name. If you're comfortable being devoted to Goddess, then pick a name. Be devoted to that. Pray to that. Pray with that. Spend time sitting in meditation in front of an altar that you've built for yourself with regard to that. If that's what you're comfortable doing, then do that. But if you're somebody who is not comfortable with that, because there is such an anti-religion or anti-religious sentiment that's moving through the world, not just the U.S., but through the entire world right now, then that's fine. You don't have to run away from the word devotion. You can be devoted to peace. You can be devoted to peace. You can be devoted to inner peace. That can be your devotion. You can be devoted to love. You can be devoted to whatever it is, nonviolence, generosity, charity, humility, friendliness, kindness. You can be devoted to unity. You can be devoted to all these things. In the end, it's going to come around to Krishna. It's going to come around to Jesus. It's going to come around to something, universal consciousness, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it. It's going to come around to that because it's all the same thing. It's just that for years, humans have divvied it up into pieces and said, this is Christ, this is Krishna, this is Shiva, this is Kali, this is Mother Earth, and they're not the same thing. But there's only one divine consciousness. So beg to differ, but they are the same thing. They're just the diversity within that. They are just a reflection of the diversity that's within that. So don't start at the hardest part. If you have a resistance to religion, if you have a resistance to saying, I'm going to adopt, Krishna as my avatar, then fine, don't start there. Don't start there. Don't set yourself up that way. Instead, what matters the most to you? What matters the most? And it's not about what other people do or don't do. And so that's something that we have to be very clear on. Well, I'm going to dedicate myself to peace. Swamini said that was a good idea, so I'll do that. I'll start with peace. I'm going to dedicate myself to peace. And then 2 weeks from now, come in and say, Swamini, I tried to dedicate myself to peace, but my neighbor wouldn't let me do it. My kids wouldn't let me do it. My partner wouldn't let me do it. They don't get it. They don't have to get it. It's not up to them to get it. It has nothing to do with them. Your dedication, your vow to peace, your devotion to peace has nothing to do with anybody but you. So your neighbor can continue being who and what they are. Your partner can continue being difficult. Your children can continue being difficult. Your boss can continue being difficult. It doesn't matter. Their compliance is not important. That's not what matters. If you're looking for compliance, you're not looking for peace. Because compliance is just a pressure cooker gaining more pressure. Have you ever complied with someone else's wishes? How'd that go for you?
Divorce.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't last long. It may last for a day, a week, a month, a year. It may last for 10 years. It may last for 30 or 40 years. It may last for 60 years. But at some point, it's not going to last because it's a worn thread waiting to break. And, they found this really interesting thing I think it was like the 1970s, they did this study, maybe it was in the 80s. And they said that they saw this very rapid escalation of divorces happening. And it was divorces between a certain age group. So it was like at that point in time, it was like ages 50 to 70. It was an immense increase in the amount of divorces that were happening. And so the anthropologists were like, well, let's check this out. What's going on? So they went and they questioned a whole bunch of people. And they said to them, so what is going on? And what they found was that the women who were somewhat influenced by the women's movement as it had happened coming through the late 50s into the 60s and 70s, that they said that they were no longer able to comply with the societal expectations, that they could comply as long as their husband was away working. But when he retired and was home day after day, the thread broke, The thread broke because there was no actual relationship there. So don't make a relationship where there isn't one. Build from the foundation up. Start with some concept that you can dedicate yourself to. And that concept, peace, love, unity, something that's very lofty, And it's not really very lofty, but in the world today, for some reason, peace is like a lofty concept. A lofty concept only for the select few. And it's like, no, actually, peace is for everybody. It's very easily accessible. It's right inside of you. It's right inside of you. All you have to do is uncover it. All you have to do is choose it. All you have to do is say, you know what? I'm a little tired of the loops of the past. I'm a little tired of the projections into the future. I think I'm going to be right here now for a little while. Another example, and I know that as I'm sharing with you today, I'm pulling examples from a lot of different kind of diverse areas, but it's just to illustrate for you how approachable peace actually is. So years ago, I still am a yoga therapist, but years ago, I started programs in local hospitals. And one of the hospitals was Deborah Heart and Lung Institute. And so I trained a number of my graduating students from my programs how to be yoga therapists, brought them into the hospital with me, taught them how to sit with the patients and teach them, all the things, meditation, yoga nidra, breathing, etc., and so on. And there's this one meditation. It's a concentration, but people call it a meditation. So there's this one practice that I absolutely love and that patients absolutely loved, even if it left them a little confused. A lot of times when someone's in the hospital, they're in a lot of pain, physical pain, mental, emotional pain. So I would lead them through and I would say, okay, so we're going to take 10 breaths. And in those 10 breaths, you're going to search your whole body and you're going to find the spot where right now you feel pain. Could be physical pain, could be mental, emotional pain that you're associating with something, but you find that place where there's something intense happening and you focus there. And we're going to take 10 breaths while you do. So they would find the spot, they would focus there, they would take 10 breaths. and take them for another trip around the body and say, okay, now this time you're looking for some place where there's freedom, some place where there's no sensations. And once you find it, you let me know, and then we're going to focus there for 10 breaths. And so inevitably they would find like the tip of their finger or the hair on their head or something, and they would focus there, and they would take 10 breaths. And then I would bring them back to the first place, and they couldn't find it because it's not there anymore. The pain's gone. There might be pain elsewhere, but that pain isn't there anymore. And so they'd become a little perplexed. And they'd say, what just happened? And I say, well, you've taught yourself something. You tell me, what did you learn? Well, I'm almost afraid to say. And I said, well, no, go ahead, put it to words, however you're comfortable doing it. And say, well, I have a question. I said, what's your question? I said, does that mean it's all in my head? I said, no, it means it's all in your body. But that it's always changing. And so you look at that and say, myself, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, the knee is broken, and it was quite painful in that moment. Is it painful now? No. From time to time, if it's going to snow, maybe. But then it's a pulse. It's like, oop, there's something there, now it's gone. So I don't walk around saying to myself, my knee always hurts. My knee will never be the same again. My knee is always aching and paining. I don't walk around that way because I know it's not the truth. The truth is, it comes and goes. And when it goes, great. And when it arrives, I do what I need to do, and I don't abide there. I don't stay there like, spending oodles and oodles of time creating fear within my own self, insulting my own inner peace over something that's going to change, something that's transient in nature. And this is Krishna's other message to Arjuna, is that one other mistake that you make is that you invest in these things that are impermanent. You make a hard investment in things that only ever change. You will not know peace as long as that is your preference. So stop investing in the things that only ever change. And yes, of course, there are things that have to be done. There are details that have to be tied up. I's to dot and T's to cross. Do that work. But don't do that work because you're looking for the outcome. The outcome is not yours. You're not owed a particular outcome. Instead, do the work for the sake of doing the work only in the present moment, and then let it go so that you can continue to do the work that approaches you in this moment. And when that happens, you'll know what to do. You'll know. You'll stop with the back and forth of the mind. Should I, shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? Shouldn't I, shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? And instead, you'll come into the place of, it's obvious what's needed, and it's obvious what isn't. And then there's this other really great teaching that I love. It's not from yoga, though. Although, where did I first hear that? Michelle might remember if I've ever said it, where I first heard it from. 100% of everything, might have been Einstein, I don't know. 100% of everything will resolve itself without you. Some of you have heard me say that many times. 100% of everything will resolve itself without you. So there's far less that you actually need to become invested in this life. And alleviating that burden from your shoulders and from your heart will also open up an inner peace within you as you stop carrying things through your life that don't actually belong to you, things that don't need you. But we all want to be needed, don't we? Each and every one of us says, but I want to be important. And here's the kicker. You are so very important. You are absolutely 110% important to your own path, your own healing, and your own awakening. And the more that you stick your nose into someone else's, the less you understand about your own. So stop being nosy. Stop trying to take over the path of others. Stop trying to fix them. Stop hating on them for not being what you expect them to be. Stop grasping. And instead, begin witnessing what's happening right now. Invest in your path, your presence, your awareness, and your awakening. And that is the greatest gift that you can give to the world. Because 9 billion ignorant people walking through the world only makes for further war and conflict. One soul awakened can make a world of difference. And just for clarity, we awaken and then we forget. We awaken and then we forget. Because in this manifested world, pretty much nothing is permanent. So that state of awakening that we're all chasing after, I want that, I want that, I want that. I want to be awakened, I want to be awakened. The moment you say, I want to be awakened, it's gone away, first of all. And second of all, when you have it, when you're in that moment where you are having clarity, where you are having patience, where you do feel immense peace and love, you can rest assured that something is going to happen that's going to irritate the hell out of you. And you're going to lose it. And you're going to come back to the loop. Why did that have to happen? See, I did bring it back around, didn't I? Why did it have to happen? Why did that have to happen? That's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. And then you just got to continue the work. You just have to continue the work. For this lifetime, for however many lifetimes it takes. Just knowing that as long as you continue the work, those moments will continue to visit you. Those moments of deep peace, self-understanding, contentment, and yes, devotion, love. They will continue to visit you more and more often. But the less that you invest in now, the less often you'll have that visitor. And the more you'll chase them. Any questions or reflections today? What do you think? Is it easy? No. Is it worthwhile? Yeah. The journey is absolutely worthwhile. And it starts with a vow. A very simple vow. I vow to experience within myself, I vow to allow the experience within myself of greater peace. And it doesn't mean that in every moment from now moving forward, I'm always going to be peaceful. That is ridiculous. Don't set yourself up for that. I vow to allow myself to experience more and more peace means it's a progression. It's a process. It's a stumble and fall and pick yourself back up again situation. The acceptance of that process is so very important to the continuation of the process. Because if you see no value in the process, then you won't continue it. You'll say, well, it's just easier to stay down when I've fallen. It's just easier to stay off the wagon. It's just easier to have doubt. And it might be easier, but how do you feel when you're there? How does it feel to live there? Not very good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Does that make sense? Yeah. Do a time check. Okay, good timing. So, just to kind of round it up today, taking that vow of inner peace and understanding that on the very first level of it, it really is a practice of self-inquiry, of coming to understand, number one, what exactly is it that you allow to steal your peace from you? Probably has something to do with the past and something to do with projecting into the future. Has to do with the power that you give to other people. Has to do with the blame that you place on other people. And has to do with the resistance to self-responsibility. So accept more self-responsibility. Accept more of the wisdom of self-regulation. Know that peace exists within you. It doesn't matter what your neighbor's doing to irritate you. You're the one who decides how to react or respond. And begin practicing that regulation. As you begin to practice self-regulation in favor of peace, more and more answers for other things will become clear. Peace will be known to you more often. And then the resistances will begin to melt away. The walls we built will begin to crumble. Maybe it's just a little piece at a time, but it'll start. I look at it like this school. This school's been here since 1932. Right? It'll be here for a really long time, absent any major catastrophe. But it's almost 100 years old. It's older than most human lives, this school. And, you go to certain parts and you'll see that there's a little place where the brick has chipped away. There's a little place where the plaster is falling off. That's what your work is like. Right? So if this school's been here for 100 years, you've got to set the long path for the work to be done and just accept the process of it. Someday in the far distant future, what will happen to this school? It won't be here anymore. This will be hopefully a lush forest. Someday in the distant future, your inner conflict will have resolved itself, and you will be a lush forest of peace, tranquility, love, devotion, and unity. Let's sit tall and close the eyes. Take a breath in and a breath out. And take a few more of those. And as you do, recite silently within yourself a vow. I vow to allow myself to experience a greater peace, a more profound love, a more complete unity. I vow to allow myself to know devotion and to allow that devotion to grow within me organically and in whatever way it will, toward a greater self-knowledge and toward an absolute self-awakening. Draw the hands together in front of the heart, and we'll lift our voices in one Om, taking a breath in. Om. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanti Swarupaham. I am the form of peace. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather with each and every one of you. May your journey be filled with learning. May your intention be filled with loving awareness, mindfulness, and confidence. May your work be filled with willpower, willingness to continue, even when it gets difficult, boring, even when it's not the stuff of the billboards that you pass by every day on your drive, you know. May your mind become clearer and clearer and clearer. Your heart become the only thing you hear. And peace become every step you take in this life. How many of you are staying for Ayurveda today? Wonderful. We're going to miss you.
I know. I'm sorry, I have to go to work.
That's okay. That's a very good reason. It's a very good reason. So we'll have a little bit of time between now and the start of Ayurveda. We'll be in here for the Ayurveda. So until then, enjoy your brunch or have a walk, use the ladies' room, men's room, whatever you need to do. And we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you all.